There's a story almost everyone knows, even if they don't realize they know it. A man warned of a flood that will wipe out humanity builds a boat, saves his family and the animals, and survives to tell the tale. Most people associate it with Noah's Arkansas. But that version came almost 1,000 years after the same story, almost word for word, was already inscribed on clay in a poem called the Epic of Gilgamesh, discovered in 1872 and studied for 150 years as if we already knew it completely. In November 2022, a program designed simply to compare fragments of text, not to understand Sumerian or Akkadian, found something no historian had ever seen. A piece of clay stored in a museum drawer for more than a century belonged to a copy of Gilgamesh made in 130 BC. That means that almost 2,000 years after the story was first written down, someone was still copying it by hand, word for word, at a time when Rome already ruled the Mediterranean. No one knew that copy existed. No human eye had ever matched it with the rest of the poem, not in London, not in Baghdad, not anywhere. And that same program, trained to find matches between broken fragments, has just found something even bigger. A complete song that every child in the schools of Babylon memorized, that vanished from human memory for more than 1,000 years, and that no one had noticed was missing until now. If you're interested in what real science is discovering about what most people ignored for a century and a half, stick around, because what follows isn't the version you've seen in other videos on this topic, and the ending changes what seems settled. To understand why a simple fragment comparison algorithm could change more in 3 years than 150 years of human work, one must grasp the true scale of the problem. Scattered among museums and universities on 4 continents are approximately 500,000 cuneiform tablets. The British Museum, according to its own records, holds more than 130,000. The Baghdad Museum houses tens of thousands more, many in precarious condition after decades of conflict. The archive compiled by Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich and the University of Baghdad alone contains more than 22,000 fragments photographed since 2018. And, according to estimates cited by researchers in the field, the number of people in the world capable of reading Akkadian or Sumerian with professional fluency numbers in the hundreds. Hundreds of specialists versus 500,000 tablets. This ratio is not a mere administrative detail. This is why entire libraries of Mesopotamian knowledge have lain for over a century in wooden drawers and storage cabinets, cataloged, photographed, but never read in the detail necessary to understand what they actually say. It's not that historians lacked interest. It's that a specialist needs, on average, an entire academic career to master the nuances of a single period of cuneiform, and cuneiform changed considerably in its 3,000 years of use. A tablet from 2800 BC is not read the same way as one from 600 BC, even though both use the same family of cuneiform signs. Before translating a single word, the specialist must first identify the period, the region, and the dialect of the scribe who wrote it. Each tablet is, quite literally, its own puzzle before the real work of translation even begins, and many of them have been waiting for over a century for someone with the time to solve them. Multiplied by 500,000 pieces, that time, calculated using traditional methods, is measured in centuries, not years. The person responsible for the breakthrough we mentioned at the beginning didn't come to archaeology looking for artificial intelligence. Enrique Jimenez, professor of ancient Near Eastern literature at Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, has been leading a project since 2018 that initially had a much more modest goal: to digitize, photograph, and catalog every known cuneiform fragment in a single open database, something no museum had managed to do in over 100 years of scattered excavations. The plan wasn't to discover new texts. It was simply to finish organizing those that already existed. To achieve this, his team traveled to the British Museum in London and the Baghdad Museum, where they photographed thousands of fragments that had been stored for decades without a unified catalog. The resulting platform is called the Babylonian Electronic Library, and today it brings together more than 22,000 photographed and transcribed pieces, many of which still lack the text to which they belong. The real breakthrough came when someone on the team wondered if an algorithm could do what a philologist intuitively does after years of practice: recognize that 2 broken fragments, separated by thousands of kilometers and stored in different collections, are actually part of the same original tablet. The solution came from a field completely unrelated to archaeology. Biologists have spent decades comparing genetic sequences to find matches between DNA fragments, identifying patterns that repeat even when parts of the sequence are damaged. Jimenez's team adapted this same principle to cuneiform text, treating each sign as a letter in a literary genetic code. They called the program Fragmentarium. Each photographed fragment first passes through a light table, where the camera captures the relief of the signs from various angles, because side lighting reveals features that a frontal photograph would never show. This almost artisanal attention to physical detail is the same approach that allowed them, in November 2022, to identify the Gilgamesh fragment from 130 BC that we mentioned at the beginning. But the discovery that truly surprised the team came later, when the same method was applied not to a poem we already knew, but to something no one knew existed. A collection of fragments that, until that moment, no one had considered important enough to study carefully. The strange thing wasn't just that the algorithm found new fragments. It was realizing how central a text had been 3,000 years ago, a text that modern science didn't even know it was missing. Jimenez himself described it as unusual, that a text so popular in its time had remained completely unknown to us until now. According to the article published in the academic journal Iraq from Cambridge University Press, co-authored with archaeologist Anmar Fadhil of the University of Baghdad, the Fragmentarium algorithm identified 30 different manuscripts, copied between the 7th and 1st centuries BC, that were actually copies of the same poem. A 250-line hymn dedicated to the greatness of Babylon. 30 copies. Not a broken tablet forgotten in a corner, but a text that generations of scribes, for 700 years, considered important enough to continue reproducing in their schools, copying it from teacher to student onto new tablets each time the previous clay cracked or was lost. And yet, no catalog or translation from the past 150 years had managed to identify that all those scattered pieces were part of the same work. Each fragment, on its own, seemed like a minor religious text, too damaged to reconstruct anything coherent. Together, they told a completely different story. The method that identified the Gilgamesh fragment in 2022 didn't remain a one-off experiment. The team decided to apply it systematically to one of the least studied collections in the archive. Fragments from the ancient city of Sapar, north of Babylon, where for decades religious artifacts catalogued as minor, too small, or damaged to warrant individual study had accumulated. Sapar, it should be noted, is not just any name for anyone familiar with Mesopotamian lore. Berossus, a Babylonian priest and historian who wrote in Greek during the 3rd century BC, recorded a local version of the flood story in which, before the inundation, the hero is ordered to bury all the tablets containing the knowledge of the ancient world precisely in Sapar, the city of the sun god, so that humanity could unearth them after the waters receded. It's a legend about knowledge deliberately hidden in that location to be recovered in the future, a legend that any scribe of the time would have known by heart. No one on Jimenez's team was trying to confirm a myth. They were simply processing, fragment by fragment, a batch of pieces that the catalog had been describing for years as being of little interest. And it was precisely among these pieces, dismissed as secondary, that the algorithm, comparing patterns of signs like someone comparing genetic sequences, began to detect something that no single fragment could reveal on its own. That 30 of these pieces, separated by centuries of copying, were in fact fragments of the same lost poem. The reconstruction was neither instantaneous nor automatic. The algorithm identifies likely matches. It is the philologists who confirm, line by line, whether these matches have grammatical, metrical, and historical significance. Fadhil, a specialist at the University of Baghdad, and Jimenez in Munich spent months comparing each fragment identified by the program against the known corpus of Babylonian literature, discarding false matches and verifying that the vocabulary, syntax, and type of clay were compatible across the different copies. The result, published in 2025 in the journal Iraq from Cambridge University Press, describes a 250-line hymn dedicated to the city of Babylon, composed around 1000 BC and copied continuously for at least 700 years, from the 7th to the 1st century BC. According to the authors themselves, about a third of the total text still needs to be reconstructed. There are lines that no known fragment preserves, gaps that will only be filled if, someday, another piece scattered in some museum drawer turns out to belong to this same work. This honesty about what is still missing is, in itself, part of the scientific method. No one in this project claims to have the complete text, only the text that the evidence allows us to support so far. This is not the only time that artificial intelligence has produced results of this kind in this field. In 2023, A team led by Guy Guthers of Tel Aviv University and Shai Gordon of Ariel University in Israel trained a different model, designed not to find fragments but to translate directly from Akkadian to English. They tested two versions, one that starts with transliterating the text into Latin script, and another that works directly with the digital representation of the cuneiform signs. The first performed better, with a translation quality score of 37.47 out of 100 on the standard metric used to evaluate machine translation systems, sufficient to produce reasonably reliable versions of formal administrative and religious texts, although still far from replacing the judgment of a human specialist on complex literary texts. Two teams in two different countries, using different methods, independently arrived at the same conclusion. The limitation for a century and a half was never a lack of academic interest, but the absence of a tool capable of processing the amount of information that these civilizations left in writing. The hymn that the algorithm helped reconstruct doesn't speak of distant gods or impossible civilizations. It speaks of the Euphrates River, of barley fields, of flocks resting in the pastures. It speaks of a city that treats captives generously and respects the foreigners who live within its walls. And, in a passage that surprised even philologists, it describes women performing priestly duties with a level of detail virtually non-existent in any other known Babylonian text. For 700 years, it was one of the poems that any child in a scribe's school would have memorized. And for the last 150 years, no historian knew it existed. It's worth recalling something we mentioned earlier, almost in passing. Many of the pieces that make up this hymn come from Sapar, the same city that, according to the legend recorded by Berossus, was where all the knowledge of the ancient world was buried to survive the flood. Turns out that the legend was, in a sense, right? Knowledge was indeed buried in Sapar. It just didn't take a flood to unearth it. It took an algorithm trained to compare broken fragments as if they were strands of DNA. But the hymn to Babylon is just one piece of something larger, and perhaps not the most surprising. While a team in Munich was reconstructing lost poetry, elsewhere, scientists had been applying a different method to a completely different kind of text for years: Babylonian medical manuals. 1,000 years before the hymn was composed, a scholar named Esagil Kanapli, chief physician to the court of King Adadapliadina, compiled a 40-tablet treatise known as Sakiku, which in Akkadian literally means all diseases. Tablet number 26 is devoted entirely to a single type of ailment: convulsions. And what it describes is not a random list of symptoms. It is a classification. The text distinguishes between convulsions that occur during the day, attributed to a specific demon, and convulsions that occur at night, attributed to a different spirit, because the treatment that works for one does not work for the other. Neurologist Edward Reynolds and Assyriologist James Kinnear Wilson, in a study published in the medical journal Epilepsy, along with philologist Martin Stoll of the University of Amsterdam, identified clinical patterns in it that we would now call tonic-clonic seizures, absence seizures, and gelastic seizures. This functional classification of epilepsy types, written on clay, predates Western medicine's formalization of the concept of differential diagnosis in the 19th century. And there's more. In 2016, astrophysicist turned historian of science Matthew Ossenderger, from Humboldt University of Berlin, published on the cover of the journal Science the results of 14 years of analyzing tablets from the British Museum. What he found was that Babylonian astronomers between 350 and 50 BC calculated Jupiter's movement across the sky by plotting, in abstract terms, the planet's speed against time, and calculating the area under that curve to obtain the distance traveled. That is, mathematically, the basic principle of integral calculus. The technique that historians of science attributed to mathematicians in Oxford and Paris around 1350 AD already existed, 1400 years earlier, in Babylon. None of these three findings needs extraterrestrials, lost civilizations, or forbidden knowledge to be astonishing. And here's something to be honest about. A considerable amount of the content circulating about Sumerian tablets translated by artificial intelligence claims that these algorithms have revealed hidden heliocentric models or evidence of a race of advanced beings secretly ruling since ancient times. No peer-reviewed article, not in Science, Iraq, or Epilepsy, supports these claims. What they do support, with names, dates, and verifiable publications, is something perhaps more uncomfortable to accept. Ordinary human beings, without external technology, without supernatural assistance, solving medical and mathematical problems with a level of sophistication that would take us thousands of years to match on our own. This doesn't mean we have to rewrite every history of science textbook from scratch. It means something more concrete and, ultimately, more unsettling. That the chronology we learned in school, the one that places the birth of systematic medicine in Greece with Hippocrates and that of calculus in medieval Europe, wasn't wrong because of anyone's bad faith. It was incomplete because for 150 years we could only read a fraction of what these civilizations actually wrote, and that fraction was, almost by definition, the simplest to translate, not the most advanced. Esagil-Kinapli never made it into medical textbooks. The anonymous astronomers who calculated Jupiter's orbit with abstract geometry never made it into math textbooks. Not because their work was any less valid. Simply because, until very recently, no one had the capacity to read it in time. And if this is true for Mesopotamia, where hundreds of specialists had already been working for a century and a half, one question remains that no academic article has yet answered. How much of what we take for granted about other ancient civilizations, the Egyptian, the Mayan, the Andean, is built on that same kind of incomplete fragment, simply because their archives also await in some repository someone to finish reading them? That is the door that this hymn, this medical tablet, and this astronomical tablet leave open, and which none of the three, separately, fully answers. Perhaps the question worth asking isn't how advanced they were, but how much of what we were taught as absolute truth, whether in school, through faith, or on television, was actually just the simplest version to tell, the one that fit within the time and tools available then. How many other stories, from your own tradition, from the things you were taught as a child about the origin of what you believe, reached you already edited not through deception but simply because no one had finished reading them? If this way of telling history with real names, verifiable sources, and without inventing anything to surprise you, is what truly interests you, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next tablet an algorithm identifies in some museum drawer could change, once again, what we thought we knew, and we want you there with us when that happens.